It's one of the OG high rollers from the very beginning of Medarot, but also one of the original masters of optical attribute attacks as well. It is RAY00 Rollstar, with a kit of triple laser, wheeled legs, and the leg ability of Breakneck, which passively buffs leg stats while in heat phase. Now, as a model that's been available in Medarot S as an event reward for a rather long period of time by now, he's one of those models that's come and gone, and sadly, as of time of recording, has not made a return just yet. But for those that have managed to snag him, this OG from not just the early days, but also anyone who has watched the anime, still has it in him to show the world that sometimes you don't need to be the fastest or the newest to really make your mark on history. Laser on all three parts is an optic attribute skill. That means it gets a times 1.5 damage bonus at 30% charge, and a times 2 damage bonus at 100% charge. So this means that even though he may not have any passive metaphor sustained by himself, once he's got a couple shots fired and some parts broken or some charge in his gauge, he will absolutely lay waste to anyone who stands in his way, and not only while he's doing that, but also while running circles around them, as if that was adding salt to the wound. Wheeled legs means that he will have a very high base mobility, arguably one of the fastest as well when it comes to the leg types, at the cost that he will be rather picky on terrains, unfortunately. So even though he's only going to be good on, say, 2 terrains at best, and that's also including Cyber, which everyone gets at S rank, Rollstar is one of those models where he's going to be fast, but he's going to be very picky on how fast he gets, depending on where he is. In the armor department, he's not too shabby either, packing about 30-50 HP for the head, about 2,800 per arm, and his legs at 3,300. He is somewhat light on the armor, not enough to call him paper armor or a glass cannon, but it would certainly be encouraged to exercise some caution if you do choose to use Rollstar on the field. But if all conditions can be met, this crayfish type can most certainly be a menace once he's got some charge built up and some firepower left going. On the topic of power as well, he's actually definitely packing some very good base power too for an optic attribute skill, with his head laser packing about 1330 for base power, the right arm just over 1100, and the left arm as well actually just over 1100 as well. So his damage will be consistent pretty much no matter which part you use, and no matter how you use him. His leg stats aren't too shabby, but a couple points that do make him rather risky to use depending on the situation. He is packing a mobility of 815, which is very good, and of course par for the course for wheeled-legged types like his. An evade of 756 isn't bad, but also not terrible, but also not great either. So he definitely will not be focusing too heavily on dodging or grazing compared to most of his other allies while on the field. A melee resist of 679 is unfortunately not great though, as even as he's just barely cusping 700 there, and that's being rather generous, he is going to be taking a pretty considerable amount of damage from incoming melee fighters that do manage to get up close and personal in his space, or even worse, outrun him. A shoot resist of 1304 though does forgive this just a little bit, but again, it is definitely encouraged that you exercise caution when using Rollstar, because light armor plus mixed reduction stats means that he will be a relatively easy target to take out. All this being so, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Rollstar a pretty solid 7 out of 10. Even though he does lack one of the biggest things that an optic attribute nuker like him needs, which is Metaphor Sustain, his relatively well-rounded damage and speed can kind of curb this to a point and make it somewhat forgivable, but that's only as long as you can keep him covered and protected, because he is somewhat light on the armor. Having wheeled legs makes him very picky on what terrains he's good at, but if you are able to keep him covered long enough to at least get a charge going, then you can most certainly see a change in his performance, and he will most certainly pull his weight on the field going forward. As mixed parts, I do very easily have to rate him higher at an 8 out of 10. Given that even though triple laser by itself may be somewhat tricky to use in terms of being competitive and PvP viable, if you are able to pair laser with something that is metaphor sustained, such as charge plant, full charge, auto charge, leg ability, or whatever you just choose to use, then you can most certainly make use of the damage possibilities that laser has available to it. Plus, as an added bonus, in comparison to Hyper Beam, which grants no dodge and no defend as a cooldown penalty, basic laser, it's much safer to use and much easier to use because it has fewer penalties and it's a lot more user-friendly, for lack of a better term, despite it having a lower damage potential.